I te kiroenga kanohi, tui ato ngā whakarerenga iho a rātou mā tēnā tātou katoa. Good afternoon, I'm David Clark. I'm the Chief Commissioner of the Transport Accident Investigation Commission. The Commission exists to help people and organisations in the transport sector by providing recommendations to address systemic safety issues that we identify, supported by robust analysis and strong evidence. Today we are releasing our report into the tragic accident that happened in Goose Bay, Kaikoura on 10 September 2022. On that day, 10 members of the Photography Society of New Zealand were on board the vessel iCatcher for a 3-hour passage to photograph seabirds when tragedy struck. The boat capsized after striking what was almost certainly a whale surfacing under the boat. That was the immediate cause of the accident, but there were a number of circumstances that followed that led to the tragedy. While 6 people survived, 5 families lost loved ones who were on board the boat. And I want to acknowledge the fact that the release of our report today will bring back unwanted memories and emotions from that time. However, we owe it to all of those involved and to anyone who goes out on the water to learn as much as we can from this tragedy in order to avoid any similar accidents happening in future. Our investigations identify the direct causes of accidents and incidents, but they also go further and sometimes identify systemic safety issues that, while not directly relevant to the accident that we were investigating at the time, do reflect weaknesses in the system that in other circumstances could be the difference between safety and tragedy. In this case, a number of those issues were identified. The Commission has been ably supported in this investigation by a skilled and experienced team of investigators led by our Chief Investigator, Naveen Kasabkalam, who's with me today. I'm going to invite Naveen to talk you through the details of what happened on that day, and then I'll talk about the safety issues and recommendations that we make in our report. Then we'll be happy to take questions. Naveen.
Thank you, Chief Commissioner. Kia ora, and good afternoon. I'll start with a quick recount of the events of September 10th, 2022. The charter fishing vessel iCatcher, it was an 8-metre aluminium pontoon boat, which was underway in Goose Bay, Kaikoura. It was carrying a skipper and 10 passengers who were engaged in a bird-watching excursion when the vessel was struck by an unidentified object. The Commission is virtually certain that the vessel was struck by a whale that had surfaced underneath the hull. This impact resulted in the vessel capsizing. 2 passengers were ejected while the skipper and 3 others had to navigate their way out of the inverted hull. 5 passengers and the skipper were able to reach the upturned hull and await rescue. The other 5 passengers remained in an air pocket underneath the vessel. Prompted by a distress call from the skipper using a passenger's mobile phone, the police initiated a search and rescue operation. Responding vessels successfully retrieved the 6 individuals on top of the upturned hull. Later, a submerged recovery operation was conducted by the Police National Dive Squad. They recovered the bodies of the 5 passengers who had become trapped within an air pocket inside the capsized vessel. The Commission's investigation determined that all 11 individuals on board the vessel initially survived the capsize. The subsequent fatalities of the 5 passengers trapped within the inverted hull were attributed to one of a combination of 3 critical factors: exposure to and inhalation of petrol fumes, prolonged immersion in the 10 degrees Celsius water, and confinement within a toxic environment. Further, the Commission established that the defects within the vessel's fuel system enabled the leakage of fuel into the air pockets of the upturned vessel. This reduced the survivability of the accident. The inflated life jackets worn by the 5 deceased passengers would have significantly impeded their ability to escape the confined space under the upturned hull. Other contributing factors to the fatal event included, as I've noted before, the inhalation of petrol fumes, the fuel into the air pockets of the upturned vessel. This reduced the survivability of the accident. The inflated life jackets worn by the 5 deceased passengers would have significantly impeded their ability to escape the confined space under the upturned hull. Other contributing factors to the fatal event included, as I've noted before, the inhalation of petrol fumes, the duration of immersion in the cold waters of the Kaikoura coast, and the inherent toxicity of the confined space. I'll now hand back to the Chief Commissioner to talk about the systemic safety issues the Commission has identified and the recommendations they have made.
The air pocket under the capsized vessel was the result of flaws in the fuel system that had not been identified in previous inspections of the vessel. The Commission found that a lack of clear guidance and direction for those investigating and inspecting vessels contributed to this failure. In response to our recommendation in our preliminary report on that issue, Maritime New Zealand has improved the requirements for fuel system inspection, and this issue has been addressed. But on further investigation, we identified some issues with the monitoring of the performance of marine surveyors, and we're recommending that Maritime New Zealand enhance the oversight system of marine surveyors to ensure and safeguard the safety of vessels and crew and passengers. And Maritime New Zealand is taking steps in that direction now. Separately, the rules around maintaining life jackets matter. Currently, anyone can repack and rearm an inflatable life jacket, and marine surveyors are not required to record the servicing history of life jackets. This creates a risk that, when needed, life jackets will not operate as intended, and we're calling on Maritime New Zealand to work with the industry to improve safety standards, including the recording of the servicing history and expiry of life-saving equipment. The international standards for manufacturing life jackets need attention as well. We're asking Standards New Zealand and Maritime New Zealand to work with their international compatriots to require manufacturers to ensure life jackets are provided with sufficient information, particularly around putting them on, taking them off, deflating them, and the risks of inflating them when under obstruction. Other life-saving equipment was relevant in this instance, and it's essential to have well-maintained and easy-to-use life-saving equipment at sea. Being thrown into the water is stressful, disorientating and debilitating, and if you surface in a confined space and you're wearing a life jacket, you might well attempt to swim out from underneath. We couldn't determine if those who lost their lives in this tragedy did do that, but it is tragic that a piece of equipment that is designed and does save lives, an inflated life jacket, could have inhibited this. Life jackets are crucial and they do save many lives, but they should be easy to use and intuitive to deflate and remove where necessary. We're calling for Maritime New Zealand to work with the industry to teach correct use of life jackets for vessel operators, to provide comprehensive safety briefings and include instructions on life jacket deflation, risks of inflating life jackets under instructions. We also found that while the iCatcher's emergency position indicating radio beacon, or EPIRB, was the right one for the vessel and was positioned in the right place, on capsize it was out of reach. None of the passengers and skipper on the upturned hull had personal locator beacons, and nor were they required to do so. And so they had to rely on cell phones to contact emergency services. But cell phones can be unreliable when wet, and cell phone coverage often doesn't extend into the marine environment. So we're recommending that crews on vessels that carry passengers have personal locator beacons or similar in order to have an extra way to signal distress. Finally, our report contains a detailed analysis in relation to New Zealand's system for fire, ambulance, police and Coast Guard emergency response. We have 7 recommendations to resolve 6 major safety issues. We found that there were delays in the system, there was restricted information flow and incompatibility of systems. While the people involved worked together in the best way possible and presented an integrated response, there were issues in the system that delayed and caused problems for them to do so. As well, water rescue procedures should have included earlier engagement with the police dive squad for their expertise. While it's unlikely that any of these issues contributed to the outcome of the tragedy in this case, in other circumstances these delays could be critical. We're calling for reviews and improvement by police, MB and the Next Generation Critical Communications Agency to address these issues. And finally, there were issues with the limitations in police resources available to coordinate the deployment of helicopters, boats and other assets in the Kaikoura region. Kaikoura was vulnerable because it wasn't resourced to respond to a large maritime accident, and it had no maritime rescue plan for the region. We've recommended that the police, the Rescue Coordination Centre and others work together to ensure that Kaikoura and all other areas of New Zealand with high boating and water activity have appropriate maritime rescue plans in place. We'd like to thank the people of Kaikoura for their support in our investigations, in our investigation, and the support they provide our investigators early in the inquiry. In particular, I acknowledge Ngā Tahu, Ngāti Kuri, Te Runanga o Kaikoura, who laid a rahui across Goose Bay after this tragic accident in their rohi. Thanks you.
I don't have anything, so...
Questions?
Question, no?
No. I think it's all explained. Thank you.
Would those 5 passengers have survived if it wasn't for the problems with the leaks in the fuel system?
It's because the other elements associated with it, it's impossible to tell for sure. It would have increased the length of time that they would have been able to survive in the upturned boat in the air pocket, but we haven't been able to establish whether without that rescue services would have been able to get there on time.
Any questions from the online people? I think that
Great.
probably wraps things up.
All right.
Thank you, Dave.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Lynn.